my name is Beruz. I run the operations for Execution Labs. Execution Labs is a accelerator and investor for video game startups. We're in Canada. Canada being a fantastic place for video games in general. We're number 3 in the world for game development, and more specifically, Execution Labs is based in Montreal. Montreal is obviously, well, I think it's a great city, home to a lot of hockey, home to poutine, which is our national dish, which is both heavy, disgusting, and delicious. But more importantly, it's also home to almost 150 game studios in the town. And this is all sorts of game studios ranging from Ubisoft with thousands of employees to lots of small indie shops, 2 people, 3 people, and a lot of 100-person studios as well in between. So that's about me and what I do. Just quickly, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about basically how to make yourself or how to make your company as investable as possible. So, what are you selling? Who are you selling to? How are you selling? Just quickly, we're going to go over that. Then closing the deal. Due diligence, basically. This is going to be the sort of boring legal finance talk, part of the talk. And then we'll end with the super cheery part of things that can go very horribly wrong. All right, so understanding your business, that's the first thing you need to do before you really even go out and try to pitch to investors. You have to know what you're doing or what you're trying to do. So what are you trying to accomplish? I like to look at this in 3 different ways. The first part is your short-term goals. And this is the stuff you do on a day-to-day basis. It could be your very short-term goal of, let's say you're building a game right now and you have a 5-year plan to build 5 games in the future, and you want to get towards that. Or maybe it's a milestone for the next 3 months. So what are you doing on your short-term goals, and how is this aligned with your long-term vision for the company? And note that I say company, not your game. This is something that a lot of indies do. They think about only the game they're making and not the company they want to build. There is a difference between the two. So if you're making a game now, that's great. What's game 2 look like? Do you know what you're doing for game 2? How does game 1 help you build game 2? Hopefully game 1 is a stepping stone towards that. If right now you're building an amazing Ninja Dragons in Space game, don't make a football game for game 2. Like, what's the link? There has to be some sort of progression for your company. And the third thing you look at while you're evaluating these 2 things is actual money you have in the bank. So at every given time, you need to know when your cash zero is. When do you actually run out of money? Do you have enough money to reach at least your short-term goals? If yes, okay, great. Then you can attain something, you have some sort of traction, and then you're able to raise money for your long-term vision. If you don't have enough money to even attain your short-term goals, well, you have a problem. You need to adjust what your goals are. If you have enough to even attain your vision, well, fantastic. I mean, I don't even know why you're here. Go work on your project. You don't need money to begin with. Once you know what you're doing, and by the way, those 3 things, I tend to look at that all the time. I suggest assessing it every quarter, basically. Make sure, is what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis really aligned with where I want to go as a company? And so always keep that in mind. Once you do that, you know what you're actually doing, that tells you what you're missing. So what do you need to be able to attain that long-term vision? Do you need just money? Is that the only thing you're missing? Or maybe, for example, you're great at making a game, but not so much at a business. Maybe you need some business help. Maybe you need community management help. There's something else. But assessing what you have will help you get there. And then if it's money you need, how much do you want? Again, knowing when your cash zero is will tell you precisely how much you need as well to attain that long-term vision. And how much are you really willing to give up? Is it equity? Is it revenue share? And this is something which, a lot of indies, as soon as you say the word equity, they're like, oh no, I absolutely want to keep all my equity. I'm not giving any up, just revenue share. But think about it for a second. Maybe equity isn't that bad compared to revenue share. As an indie, as a struggling indie, you need every dollar you can get. And you need that money to come in so you can then reinvest it on your next game and be able to grow as a company. So sometimes consider that trade-off. Don't just always say giving away equity is a horrible deal. Do you want to give away IP rights? Do you want to give away creative control? I'm not saying you should, but just think about how far you're willing to go, and that'll then be able to tell you who you're also targeting in terms of investment options. Every now and then I like suggesting books to read. So Art of Start is a good one if you're really starting out and want to know about creating a company. Also, do you pass the smell test? Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Put yourself in your investor's shoes. Would you invest in yourself? Just basic things like, are you one person working part-time on a game? Are you trying to build a super ambitious 5-year massive game? Those things people don't generally invest in, so make sure you pass at least those sort of tests before you go looking for investment. Just remember that people don't really invest in your dream. They'll invest in opportunities that helps them get to what they want to do. So who are you selling to? There's a lot of different options out there. I'm not going to go through all of them. I mean, government, in some places, depends where you are, is an interesting option. In Canada, for example, we have a lot of different funding options that the government helps out with. The Canada Media Fund is a good one, tax credits. There's all sorts of different things. But for a lot of people, it's a viable option. Look at your country, look at your city. And I mean, there's options sometimes on the city, on the district, then the city, then the country, maybe even for you guys like on the EU aspect, maybe there's some funding options there. So that's something you can look at. A lot of indies don't even really realize that there are funding options. I won't go through publishers and all that. You guys know about that stuff. The one I do want to go through a little bit more is VC, because indies generally don't know what VCs are. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of how that really works. So basically a VC is someone who invests other people's money. That's the most general way of putting it. So for a VC, you have limited partners, and these are the people who actually put in money together. They pool all their money together into what is called a fund. The fund is managed by general partners. So you have LPs and you have GPs. Then once all the money is in the fund, they make the investments, and if any of these investments really pan out and create money, it typically goes back 20% to GPs, and then 80% goes back to the limited partners. Very quickly, that's kind of the structure you're looking at for a VC. So I can give you slides after if you really want. So VCs are looking to make money. They're looking to make money for their limited partners. And so what they're going to look for is exits, either a sale or an IPO of your company if they invest in you. And typically we're looking at, I'm not a VC when I say we, but VCs are looking for 3 to 4x return to their limited partners. So what this means is, just briefly a quick scenario, is let's say you guys look at a VC for funding for your game, and they want to invest $1 million into you for 25% equity. Just quick math, that means you have a $4 million post-money valuation, the worth of your company. And when you look at the 3 to 4x return and the 80% that goes back to the limited partners, that means a VC will quickly calculate that your company needs to sell for $20 million for them to make the money back on this investment. And this is the absolute minimum that they would make. Normally, the reality is that VCs is a highly hit-driven business model. So when they look at every investment they do, they actually hope that each investment will pay back for the full fund. So looking at the size of the fund is a good way of seeing what they're actually trying to do. If it's a $20 million fund, you're going to typically invest in companies that could sell for $100 million. And what you see in the US is a lot of VCs that are, let's say like $400 million funds, and those guys are looking for unicorns, which are billion-dollar plus companies. And unicorns are crazy rare. They used to be a lot more rare. They're just fun facts. 2003 to 2013, there were only 39 unicorns in all of tech when you look at US VC-backed companies. Last year alone, suddenly there were 68 when you look at just mobile internet startups. And out of those 68, 11 of the 68 were game-related. So there are game-related, and this is worldwide, by the way, for that number. So when you look at worldwide, there are game companies out there that are worth more than $1 billion last year that went public or sold. So since they are looking for companies that could sell for so much money, if you are interested at some point to look at VCs, just keep in mind that they're extremely picky with who they look at. Only 1 or 2% of companies are funded through VCs, the ones that actually pitch to them. So when should you contact a VC? Don't go see them when you have just an idea. Obviously, that's a terrible thing to do. You have to show some sort of traction. You have to have something, some sort of product market fit, some sort of validation with the market. That's when you go talk to a VC. And this is generally true also for publishers and anyone else. What's interesting to note, and this I got from some VC buddies, is what they look at first and foremost is market opportunity. They have to make sure, they want to see that there is a demand in the market for what you're building as a game or as a company. Then is the team of entrepreneurs, a team of founders. And they make sure you're sane, you know what you're doing, and that you're a good team. After that is the execution, the actual product. So the game itself comes last in terms of priorities when they evaluate if you're investable or not. And you need to show them that you understand both the initial target market and the future vision. And this goes back again to that short-term versus the long-term vision. You have to see where you're going and where your product could fit in the market. So when it comes to finding out who you want to pitch to, choose wisely. And there's a difference between smart money and dumb money. And I don't know if there's anybody here which works for a VC which maybe is considered dumb money. I'm sorry if you are. Basically, what I say is dumb money is an investment that provides absolutely no strategic value. It's just money. And some people need that. Some people want just money, and they think they can handle everything else themselves, which is fine. But when you do assess what you're actually doing with your business and what you're doing and what you're missing, maybe smart money is more what you're looking for. It's money plus something else, plus a little bit of strategic help, a little bit of help on building the game or building the company. So you have to weigh that. What do you really need? And make sure that the person you're pitching to is aligned with you, and they know where you're going, and they're aligned with their goals as well in terms of where you're going. So if your long-term vision is that your game will only release in 3 years, make sure you're investing with someone who's not going to rush you to release next year. Because keep that in mind when you're, for example, going to the VC, suddenly your company might change a bit because they might be pushing you towards growing or selling much faster than you want to. So again, keep in mind you're building a long-term relationship. This is not a one-night stand, regardless of who you are investing with. And you know, I'll let you guys figure out who's the pig and who's the tiger in that picture. All right. So how are you selling? There's tons of information on the internet about you know, what to include in a pitch. So I'm not going to go through all that, but basically tell a story. You know, cover the why, the how. What's your secret sauce? These are the basic things you should talk about in your pitch. There's a lot of different formats for how you can pitch. You know, from 30-second elevator pitch to 1 to 2 pager, 10 pager. I suggest you have all of them ready. Have them all like in a folder somewhere, ready to go, so that you can use whichever one you want depending on who you're pitching to. And the pitch is different if you're pitching to a publisher or you're pitching to a VC or you're pitching to government. So have different variations ready to go. So you can just use them as you need. Have a playable demo. Super important. Have it tested, ready to go before you even start pitching, so that there's no delay between the time you talk to someone and when you can actually show them a demo. So if you talk to someone right away, next day email them, or next hour email them, here's a link to my demo. Hope to hear from you soon. Be super clear on what you actually want in your pitch. You know, what's the ask? So have an idea of what the valuation for your company is. This is really hard to be able to actually calculate, especially for an indie. Probably you're going to end up using what offers you have on the table as a gauge of what your valuation should be. If you guys want to actually look into formal ways of evaluating, a good book to look at, for example, is Venture Deals. That one's pretty decent for this sort of stuff. Make sure in your pitch, you know, investors know what they're actually paying for. They're not just paying for a couple of months of runway for you to survive. That they're actually paying for you hitting a milestone of some sort. And pitching is really long and hard, and not just pitching, but the whole process of getting money. This is basically a full-time job. So if you are a developer working on your game, keep that in mind, that you need to also do this full-time job of trying to get money. So either you have to do it or someone else has to do it, but you have to plan ahead of time to do it. Don't wait until you're desperate and you actually need money. The best time to pitch is when you don't need the money. That's really when you should start planning for it. And of course, it's always all about the network. You know, indies everywhere. It's the same thing in Montreal. I'm sure it's the same thing here. You have a network of indie companies that you talk to all the time. You know, when you're practicing your pitch, invite a couple of other indies to listen, give you feedback on the pitch. Same thing with your demos, get feedback on that. If you're, you know, creating a Kickstarter campaign or Kickstarter videos, ask for feedback on that as well. Always ask for feedback before you do it. Create your community, you know, build it up over time early on, plan for it so that you have some fans. They're really going to help you out when you are running a Kickstarter or you're going on Greenlight. And that's good traction, that's good numbers to then show in your pitch when you're actually pitching to investors that you already have some community build up. Sealing the deal, this is that due diligence part I was talking about, and it's kind of a lie. It's not just after, let's say you have a handshake and now you want to formally sign contracts. A lot of the due diligence stuff is important to do beforehand because it'll be important for the negotiation before you're even, you know, signing or giving a handshake. There's something called a data room, which is basically a virtual folder of all your legal docs or all the stuff that's important for your document. This is quite important to have ready to go, and preferably, I know it's not obvious or easy to do, preferably in English and virtual as well, because, you know, if an investor asks you for your legal docs, if you have it only a paper version in Polish, I mean, there's not much you can do with that unless you're only looking for local investors. So just gonna go quickly through the different parts of the data room. Business model and overview, so just a quick blurb in there about what your company vision is. Hopefully you've done some sort of market analysis and competitive analysis of your game. You know, why is it gonna succeed? Who else has made a game like yours? Who has failed making a game like yours? That's super important to look at. You know, what's your business model and key results, if you have any. You know, put some numbers in there. That's always important to share with the potential investors. Under employment and contracts, so who's your key staff? Put some bios in there. If you have any employment agreements, put them in there as well to just show that people are committed. If you have any sort of non-competes in place or any sort of non-disclosures, that should be part of the employment agreements as well. Do you have any other contracts that are relevant? You know, make sure that that is kept somewhere that investors can see and they don't freak out. Like if you've signed a lease that's, you know, a multi-year, very expensive lease or a revenue share that you've given to an agent, you know, make sure that's super clear. On the finances side, you know, have a budget, sales forecast ready to go. If you have any financial statements, you should. Make sure that's also ready to go, end of year financial statements. Tax returns would be great to have as well. On the legal side, so obviously incorporation documents, have that ready to send out. If you have a minutes book, again, you should. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe some of this stuff, by the way, only applies to North America. If it doesn't, feel free to just ignore everything I'm saying. But a minutes book is, you know, basically it's a folder that your lawyer will keep with all docs that are relevant to your company in terms of the legal docs. So incorporation documents, any sort of board resolutions, it would all be in there. Then have everything related to your IP, just like a list of what IPs you own. If you have any sort of, well, people who are working on your game should have signed over some sort of IP rights or waiver. In Canada, we also have something called moral rights. I'm not sure what it is in Poland, but look into that as well. Just make sure that everyone who's working on the game has signed over all rights to the IP before you're even looking for investment, because investors will make sure that's done. If not, there's a risk on the IP. And a cap table, basically who owns a percentage of your company in terms of actual equity, convertible notes, options. Employee stock option doesn't exist everywhere in the world, but it's something that's nice to have if you do have that. And then the concept of reverse vesting is super important, and most indies don't know about this. Basically, if, let's say you're a team of 4 people starting a company, instead of all 4 people having 25% of the company right away on day one, you want to reverse vest that equity so they only get it over time. typically it'll be something like over 4 years. So after the first year, they get 25% of their shares, and then for the 3 remaining years, they get it month by month until they have all 100% of their shares after 4 years. This is to make sure that you don't start a company with 4 people, and then on day 2, someone leaves, and he leaves with 25% of the shares of the company, and the rest of the founders are screwed. There's other ways of doing this as well, like buyback clauses or whatnot, but you should have something in place to protect the company. And then just some details, more things to just remember when you're doing this due diligence stuff. Insurance. There's all sorts of different insurances you need. One of them that's interesting. Most people don't need this, but if, let's say, you have a founder that's super key to your company, that the company cannot exist without him, maybe it's worth having a life insurance policy on him in the name of the company, so that if he or she gets hit by a bus tomorrow, then the company would get something back and could survive and not, close up tomorrow. Taxes. Are you paying all your taxes? I hope so. Or if you're selling internationally, do you know how to collect taxes? I'm not a tax specialist. I don't know what it is for you guys here, but that's something to look into. Basically, all this stuff is investors want to make sure that you know what you're doing and everything is covered in your company, so that when they invest, they feel safe that their investment's in good hands. And then, things that can go horribly wrong. Here's a short list of them. Just keep in mind, it's never really done until you have money, until the money has been transferred and it's in your bank account. So a lot of the times, and this is the same when dealing with VC or publishers or whoever else, it could take a super long time to get money, like 6 months or more. So you have to plan ahead of time for this. And again, I said look for money when you don't actually need it, because it can take a lot of months before the money is actually transferred to you. So plan for it, have enough money to last. A term sheet by itself is not a final, legally binding document. Investors could pull out if anything goes wrong. So have a plan B or plan C ready to go. I've heard of some cases where a company was feeling great that they had investment, and then it didn't work out, and suddenly they were completely screwed because they had nothing else. So even if you're going through the process with someone to get money, just talk to a couple of other people on the side, make sure that they're also available or interested in case it doesn't work out. And this is more of a detail, but watch out for your legal fees. When you're dealing with investors, normally you as a company will pay for all the legal fees of the transaction. So when you're talking about that in the term sheet, cap them. Say maximum $25,000 of legal fees. If you're dealing with multiple investors during a round, make sure that there's one lawyer on the other side representing everybody, and you're talking to only one lawyer, so that there's not tons of back and forth with multiple people, and when you pay by hour for a lawyer, it gets super expensive. So, I'm a little bit ahead of time. I talk fast, 23 minutes. Final thoughts. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to prepare for funding. So again, know your who, what, and how. Get all your house in order. Get your documents ready. Keep that data room updated constantly as you're growing your company, so that you have it ready whenever you're just talking to someone. They're like, oh yeah, maybe I want to invest in you guys. Can you share some documents? Bam, you just take some stuff out of that data room and you're good to go. And again, keep in mind, this is really not the same skill set as making a game. Most indies are awesome at building games. They know nothing about building a business. So either learn about some finance and legal, or hire someone or partner with someone who does, because it's a huge time sink. That's it, super quick. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So you talked at the beginning about, you gave an example of an investment of say $1 million or two, and then the investor's looking for a $20 million exit. Can you talk a little bit about the exit side? How do indies or small game studios can position themselves to get to an exit after a number of years? Because a lot of game companies sort of focus on doing product and not necessarily on growing to an IPO or to an acquisition.
Yeah, so there's different ways of growing your company to get to that point where you can have an exit. I mean, not everyone is thinking about, oh, I want to be Zynga and be $1 billion company. But basically, like I had mentioned, make sure that for example, every game you're working on kind of builds upon the last one, so that you're building a sort of core skill set and which is relevant and makes you attractive as a team, and makes, for example, the tech you're working with or the engine you're working with more valuable because you keep building on it over time. Or build a huge fan base. You know, maybe you're not making tons of money, but you have traction because you have 1 million fans out there. That's valuable as well. And then you're setting yourself up not to go public, because going public is super rare for games, but you're setting yourself up to be maybe purchased by another company. That's a very viable option for game companies if you're looking for an exit.
And maybe a follow-up to this. What are the chances of this kind of an exit in your experience? Like how often do large game companies acquire small game companies?
It's actually not that uncommon nowadays. I mean, we deal a lot with you know, with publishers, with all sorts of investors who are hungry and looking for game companies, and we also deal with the indies as well, and we kind of are in the middle of all that. There are a lot of, you know, maybe a lot is a strong word, but there are a good amount of companies out there who are hungry and looking to purchase game companies. There's quite a few in Asia, for example, who are looking to invest on the Western side and are looking for companies. I know of example a couple who are particularly looking at Poland and countries around here who want to buy companies here to have some sort of, you know, foothold and presence here. But it's not that uncommon. It's a good strategy to have. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
How long does the process take? You know, from the pitching point to the signing a deal, like on average?
Yeah. So that's super variable. But typically speaking, it's quite long. You could pitch, or I mean, you can, from, like, let's say you go to GDC or Gamescom or something for a first-time introduction to a publisher. That first meeting is probably just going to be a sort of handshake. Hi, how's it going? Get a drink with them. From that moment on, it could be, if they really love you, it could happen quite fast. Let's say 3 months. But it could also take a very long time, you know, a year. I'd say on average, maybe 6 months is a good estimate on how long it takes to get money. Yeah, sometimes it's a lot faster than that. Like you do hear stories of someone getting funded like super fast, but generally speaking, that's not the case. Yes.
How do these protect themselves from, say, investors pulling out after, say, 6 months of discussion? Can like have clauses such as, say, once they decide to pull out, they'll get covered with legal fees, something like that?
Yeah, you can't really protect against that. I mean, your best protection is to not just put your blinders on and focus only on that one deal, and to still, you know, look at your other options out there, because really there is nothing stopping someone from pulling out before the deal is signed, before the money is transferred. From personal experience, it's happened to us once where we did have a company or an investor pull out at, like, not even the 11th hour, at 11:59. One of the investors said, you know what, no, forget it, I'm out. And you know, it was a big freak out. We panicked a lot, but because we had some other options, we managed to survive and get through the investment round. But yeah, just basically always keep options open and talk to people. And make sure, for example, sometimes in your term sheet, it's specifically stated, you know, once this term sheet is signed, you can no longer talk to other investors. So that's something you can talk to with them to make sure, not that you're going to go try to, you know, screw over your investors by shopping it around, but that you're still allowed to at least entertain discussions with other people. Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming, and I'm still going to stick around if you have anything else to ask. Thank you.